I am a part-time hairstylist, a full-time mom to a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old daughter. My name is Francesca Hammersmith, and I am a miraculous mama.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. My name's Elizabeth Joy, and I'm so glad that you are here. We believe in empowering women through storytelling and education, and today we are going to learn so much from a pelvic floor therapist. It's such a fun episode, but before we get into that, I would be 42 weeks, guys. So if you're on this journey with me, I recorded this episode in advance to give myself a little bit of time to be prepared for when I went into labor or a couple weeks maternity leave, just to adjust to a whole new life that I don't know anything about. So if I haven't had the baby by now, I will be being induced. So send lots of prayers and just good baby vibes our way. And that basically means I'm at the end, no matter what, whether I've already given birth or not. So Vito and I will have some exciting updates and news for you guys soon. It's pretty crazy, guys. But I'm really excited. Right now I'm feeling really good. Really excited to give birth. And like I said, today's pelvic floor therapist, it's Melissa Dessaulles, and she is just awesome. She breaks down misconceptions and answers tons of questions. And if you guys haven't done pelvic floor therapy, give yourself that gift. Do it while you're pregnant. Do it postpartum. I would honestly highly recommend starting when you're pregnant. I started during my pregnancy, and it gives you such an amazing basis to work with starting immediately postpartum. Obviously, there's not a lot you can do, but there's simple breathing things that you can start week 1 to start get your pelvic floor back and healing. So it's definitely something that if you've questioned, is everything okay down there? Go see a pelvic floor therapist. Give yourself that gift and encourage every woman that you know to do the same, because it is such an amazing tool and resource to have when you are working with a great pelvic floor therapist. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Melissa on so you guys can hear this amazing interview. All right, everyone, I have Melissa Dessaulles here, and she's a pelvic floor therapist and expert, and we are going to talk all about her company, Mommy Berries, but also, more importantly, pelvic floor health, which as a woman, everybody deals with. And a lot of people only think of it or link it to pregnancy or postpartum. So we're going to go over some misconceptions, but also just the importance of pelvic floor therapy. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
I would love for you to tell us, to start, just a little bit about yourself and how you got into all of this.
Absolutely. So I live on the west coast, basically, of Canada, so in British Columbia. I've been, I might sometimes say physio, because in Canada we refer to ourselves as physios, but I'll try to say physical therapist. Same
That's
thing.
Okay.
I've been a physical therapist for about 14 years. Never thought my calling would be talking to people about their vaginas or like peeing and pooping. And then I had a baby out of my vagina. And that was 7 years ago. I had my first. And I would say that I was kind of, smacked in the head with all these things that at the time, 7 years ago, no one even talked about this. And so even as a physical therapist, it was not on my radar. I was very active. I was very fit. I thought I would kind of I'm strong. I'll power through this. And I was totally wrong. And so it was when I started getting help that I thought, this is really important. And ever since then, that's all I've done. That's what I do now in my clinical practice, is see lots of, mostly men, some women. And you're right, mostly pregnancy and postpartum related issues, but lots of people that have never had babies too. Yeah. I have 2 kids now. I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son.
So you're probably a lot more prepared with the 4-year-old than pelvic floor health wise.
I would say that it was less, I wouldn't say the birth went that different. I would say my mindset about it was different. I went in at least this time feeling prepared, and I wasn't so overwhelmed by what is this going to look like. And I knew what to do after. I felt a little bit more confident. And afterwards, when I was having weird symptoms like peeing or pressure in my vagina or sex felt weird, it wasn't so scary. It was like, oh, of course I'm having this based on what happened. And here are some things that I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would love to kind of dive into a lot of the misconceptions, because when people think pelvic floor health, the one word comes to their mind, Kegels or Kegels. Yeah. How do you say it?
I say Kegel.
Kegel. So, and I think that there's even tons of misconceptions about that as well, because there's a right way to do it, but is there really a wrong way?
Well, a Kegel, you're right. It gets a lot of talk, but I think a lot of people don't understand what a Kegel truly is. And I always explain the pelvic floor is very similar to other muscles in our body. And we know, say, for example, our bicep, because we can see it all the time, but every muscle in our body, let's use the bicep, for example, needs to be able to go from like a relaxed position to a tight position. Okay. And it spends its day doing all movements in between there. When we do things like lift something heavy, the bicep has to tighten. When we go to bed at night, it relaxes. And the pelvic floor is very similar. When we do things like that cause pressure, like cough or sneeze or lift something heavy or jump, the pelvic floor needs to respond with tension. So it needs to tighten, and stop us from leaking pee or poo. Okay. But when the pressure is gone, like we stop coughing or we're done our jump or what we put down the heavy object, the pelvic floor should relax. So it's very similar in that way, in that it has to tighten and relax. It does all of this behind the scenes. It's very automatic. That's why people don't know much about their pelvic floor. Us doing a Kegel is our way of controlling those muscles and tightening them. So when the pelvic floor tightens, the holes close. So kind of the P tube and the anus close, and everything lifts bottom up. There's no name for relaxing the pelvic floor, though. So Kegel's tightening, there's no name for relaxation. But as you know, from every other muscle in the body, both are important. No muscle in the body wants to be tight all the time, or it doesn't work very well, right? If you came into the clinic, you're like, Melissa, my neck is so tight. Would that be, you wouldn't be coming in bragging about that. It would be giving you problems. And I think that that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that all symptoms are a result of weakness. And so therefore we think we should just be tightening and tightening and tightening. But sometimes, again, if you came in with pain, in your neck, you'd probably have tension in your neck. And if I told you to keep tightening, you'd think I was crazy. Mm-hmm. And so when we keep tightening and tightening, often we're perpetuating the problem.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a quick break from this episode to talk about something that's not very fun to talk about, but there is a solution. And the problem is that over 2,000 babies die each year from suffocation. Rollovers are deadly, and they do happen. And being a parent is stressful enough. I know everyone's trying their hardest out there, and you can't stay up all night worrying, watching the monitor to prevent fatal accidents. But there is a solution, and that is the Newton Baby Crib Mattress, because they are fully breathable, washable, recyclable. It's a 2-stage crib mattress, and this is the only 100% washable crib mattress available on the market, which is every parent's dream. You can wash it, reuse it, pass it down from kid to kid. Independent tests have shown that a baby gets 97% more air while breathing through a Newton crib mattress than on a traditional crib mattress. So I know for me, I did the Breathe to Believe challenge, and I'm very claustrophobic, so I didn't want to do it, but I laid face down on the mattress because I'm like, okay, if I'm going to use this for my baby, I need to make sure that it's good. So I did it, and Vito did it. We could breathe through it, and it gave us this incredible peace of mind because, like I said, there's so much out of your control, but knowing that your baby's on a breathable mattress, and it's also Green Guard Gold certified, and it was voted number 1 by leading pediatrician experts and sleep coaches worldwide. And if you guys don't know what that certification means, it means that it's clean. It's not full of toxic, gross products in it. It's hypoallergenic, free of off-gassing, and again, fully washable. It's the only mattress that's fully washable. So right now we have an awesome deal for you guys. Newton Baby is offering the listeners $50 off your Newton Crib mattress plus free shipping. Just go to newtonbaby.com and enter code MAMAS. You can also try 100 nights of sleep on Newton Baby. And if you're not happy, Newton offers free returns. Just go to newtonbaby.com and enter code MAMAS. Because it's 100% washable, this investment will actually save you money in the long run, which is another reason why we got it, because we can use it for all the kids that we have. As you pass it down from child to child, it will stay intact. Again, head to newtonbaby.com and enter code MAMAS to get $50 off. With the 100-night sleep guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Rest assured, Newton Crib mattress are 100% breathable, designed with the Breathe Through technology. If you don't believe me, I encourage you to try the hashtag Breathe to Believe challenge as well. So many parents receive the mattress and talk about how the first thing they did was smush their face into it and take a deep breath, which is what we did as well. So again, if you're looking for the number one baby mattress out there, 100% breathable, washable, and backed by the top pediatrics worldwide, then look no further. So many parents have claimed their Newton Baby mattress is a complete lifesaver, completely eliminating any fears and angst as a parent. Remember, Newton Baby is offering the listeners $50 off your Newton Crib mattress plus free shipping. Just go to newtonbaby.com and enter code MAMAS. You can also try 100 nights of sleep on Newton Baby, and if you're not happy, Newton offers free returns. Just go to newtonbaby.com and enter code MAMAS to get $50 off today. You can't put a price tag on your child's safety. Now back to the episode. Everyone should go to a pelvic floor therapist at some point, I almost feel, because we're not really taught that much about our bodies.
Totally.
Until it's like, oh, I'm pregnant now. I sneezed and peed a little bit. Maybe I should look into that. And before that, it's like we're not really taught to make that connection and too much about our bodies. But if you hear a lot from people, oh, you're pregnant, make sure you're doing your Kegels. Yeah. But is it okay to just blindly do them without knowing about them?
Yeah, you're right. And they've done research on this, and they've shown that, I can't remember the statistic right now, but a high percentage of women, if you only give, it was over 50%, I'm pretty sure, but if you only give them written or verbal instructions, the majority of them are doing it incorrectly. And so I usually ask people when they come into the clinic, I ask them to do one and I watch them first from the outside. And you're right, you can't truly feel those muscles until you do an internal exam. But what I usually do is watch them, because if I can see something, then they're probably doing it wrong. It should all be internal muscles. And if you kind of just sit actually where you are and feel your sit bones going straight down underneath you, when you do a Kegel, the first thing you should notice is that a very gentle closure of your vagina and your anus. So you should notice that it does stop it would be stopping your pee and your poo, but that it closes like in a circular way. And then when you relax them, it just kind of softens. You should also feel a lift. So I always tell people to think of a clock, with 12 o'clock being your clitoris. So that's the very front of your pelvic floor. Let's say 3 o'clock is your sit bone on your right. 6 o'clock is your tailbone, and 9 o'clock would be your sit bone on your left. All of those numbers of the clock should meet in the middle and lift up. It's all bottom up. And when I watch most people, they do like a pressure. They use a lot of their abs, and so they're pushing down, right? And so lots of women will say, like, I don't understand. Like, I do these Kegels all the time, and I try so hard to engage those muscles when I pee, but I'm still leaking. But if they are sending pressure and using muscles in their abdomen, then it will push down, and they're actually not helping at all. So you're right. I mean, I think that there's a lot we can do from the outside. I've definitely been doing more virtual sessions with all this COVID thing. And I definitely find that if you can kind of explain the anatomy and show people, I have models that I show them, you can definitely get somewhere with doing that. But you're right. Until you actually feel what someone's doing, you're kind of guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing pelvic floor therapy since April. And it did start virtually. So we did do virtual sessions, and she used models and a lot of explanation, and even, like, okay, if you put your hand right there, can you feel, this like muscle or whatever. So, and even visualization, I didn't know how powerful visualization is when it comes to relaxing the pelvic floor and expanding it and stretching it. And, but then we finally were able to meet in clinic and do an exam so she could tell and make sure that I was doing the exercises properly and things like that. So it is super interesting. I mean, going into it, basically how I started was, I think I was around 20 some weeks pregnant. And I was noticing that I was peeing, not a lot, but more, every time I'd brush my teeth, I'd gag and then I'd pee a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, working as a doula, I have seen the benefits of pelvic floor therapy, especially postpartum, but I am a huge advocate for preventative care. So what can I be doing now to prepare myself for labor and delivery and hopefully make postpartum even easier? So I asked my midwife to refer me to a pelvic floor therapist, and I'm so glad that I did, because I've been able to kind of start that groundwork and start laying it now to be able to hopefully make it easier postpartum. Would you think that most people come to you when it's just for the postpartum? Like less people come to you during pregnancy?
I would say that it when I first started, it was pretty well always postpartum. But then you start to see themes. I mean, the way that, I started to see people come in with some of the same symptoms over and over again. And I mean, once you really start to understand all the changes during pregnancy, and of course we're all unique and we're all individuals, but we all still go through this same type of change during pregnancy and a similar quote unquote injury during birth with either a C-section or a vaginal birth. And so we're left with a lot of the same symptoms after. So I started seeing the way I look at it now is our body goes through such a huge change and an injury, but this is planned, right? We know this is coming. And so and then I was reaching out to local doulas, midwives, doctors, and kind of explaining, the benefits to someone coming in before, so that they're not so surprised after. They understand the muscles involved, they understand what's going to happen, and they have a bit of a plan before they're in the thick of it after. And so I would say my caseload has changed drastically to now being lots of pregnant women that are coming in, and they're not necessarily even having any symptoms. They're not coming in because something's wrong. They're coming in because they're like, I understand something big is happening, and I'm interested, like you said, in kind of learning about my body and feeling like I have a plan for postpartum.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, well, let's dive into maybe some other misconceptions. Because like I said, you think of pelvic floor therapy and you think of Kegels. So is there other things that you do as a pelvic floor therapist?
Absolutely. I would say that the pelvic floor is only part of it, but I was explaining, I just put up a story or a post on my Instagram page just the other day explaining that how I explain it to people is I think of it like a balloon. When we're pregnant, we stretch like a balloon. The whole abdomen stretches. I would say the front probably stretches the most because that's where we're carrying our baby. But that's part of the reason we get diastasis, is because our abdominals have to accommodate that stretching balloon. Our ribs at the side need to accommodate. They need to kind of slowly expand to take on that growth of the balloon. Our posture changes big time, and our pelvic floor makes up the bottom of the balloon. And I think a lot of people picture that the pelvic floor is floppy during pregnancy with all of the relaxin that's in our body, and the fact that our pelvis is definitely more, I always call it wonky pelvis, like just with the hormones, that our pelvis does start to move more to make way or make room for baby to come. But the pelvic floor responds with more tension because of that decreased stability and the weight of the baby over top. What I'm trying to say is the whole balloon changes. It's not just one thing. And after we have a baby, not only have our muscles gone to extreme length, like all of the core muscles, our muscles in our abdomen, and all the other things I talked about are put at length. And then we go through an injury of those tissues, either the front or the bottom. But the whole balloon is connected. And like most people that are listening to this that have had a baby before, you have that sensation of that balloon popping after. You still have the length through all the walls. It doesn't just go whoop back to like shrink wrap. You still have that length left over. And so your whole balloon feels like weird because you've got this stretch at the front. You've got some areas of tension to help support. And the pelvic floor does not work in isolation. So the pelvic floor is part of it. But lots of times I would see them for several sessions before I even do much with their pelvic floor, because it depends, I would say, on what area of the balloon they're most talking about, if that makes sense. So, someone might come in and feel mostly back pain. I don't think I would necessarily go to their pelvic floor first, even if they had a baby out their pelvic floor. It kind of depends on what symptoms are standing out to them. But I would consider the whole thing. And yeah, sometimes I think saying just pelvic floor therapist doesn't kind of give it justice, because sure, I would teach people how to strengthen their pelvic floor, but there's so many other components. And obviously, like, the other thing that I would ask people, one of the first sentences when they come in is like, what do you do? And what are your goals? Because that matters too. That all has to be considered as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what type of exercise do you want to get back to? Or
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found it interesting when I started having some lower back pain, and I just mentioned it to my therapist, and she gave me exercises for it. And I didn't know that was, I thought maybe she'd be like, oh yeah, you should go do this, or go see a chiropractor, or go, I don't know, but she's well educated and encompassed in that area as well to help me with lower back pain. I was dealing with some sciatica issues and stuff like that as well. And you're right. I do think that the pelvic floor therapist title doesn't do justice everything that you guys do, because your scope is so much bigger than just when you think of pelvic floor,
Yeah, I always kind of explain to my clients when they come in, I kind of give them a background and say, this is how I got into the area. And then I explain it in terms of another injury. I say, for example, let's take your ankle. Let's say you had a really bad sprain of your ankle. And, after a while, after the ankle injury, it felt stiff. It felt like it didn't move. And then what would you do after? I mean, you'd probably you might wait and see what happens, but you might notice it's okay for a while. And then when you start doing something hard, it starts to show up as painful or stiff or what have you. But generally you would know after that ankle sprain that you need to kind of get the movement back. Then you need to make sure you get the strength back. Then you start doing hard things like running or jumping. Whereas postpartum women, for some reason, we have this societal pressure that we need to lose all of our weight and get back to our pre-pregnancy body and our fitness level. But I mean, we still have to respect that there's that injury time in there after. And so I would say that we help you recover after we're the people that do the rehab with you after you have a baby, in the case of pregnancy and postpartum. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. You ladies already know the importance of taking care of your skin. And whether you're worried about dullness, redness, fine lines, or acne, trying to find the right treatment can be so frustrating. But now there's a simpler, smarter solution to skincare. Meet Roy, a digital health clinic for women. Roy is the sister brand of Roman. Like Roman, they make it simple to connect with a healthcare professional online and see if personalized prescription skincare treatment is right for you, all from the comfort of your home. You can go on your phone or computer, complete a free online consultation, and you'll hear back from a U.S. licensed healthcare professional within 24 hours. And if appropriate, they'll prescribe a personalized skincare treatment plan that works just for you and your skin. With Roy, you don't even have to go to the pharmacy. Your custom skincare is delivered right to you with free 2-day shipping. You can also follow up with a healthcare professional anytime if you need to make a change to your treatment or have any questions. They're with you every step of the way on your skincare journey. With Roy, there's no commitments and you can cancel anytime. I encourage you to check out their website. Go to helloroy.com/mamas to try out Nightly Defense for just $5. It's free to chat with a doctor and your first order is just $5. That's helloroy.com/mamas. Eligibility requirements and additional terms apply. I would love to go into a little bit of core and pelvic floor during and after pregnancy. and why it's so important to be mindful of those two things.
So I would say, again, if you think of it like the ankle injury that I just mentioned, after your ankle injury, we're going to be focusing primarily on the ankle, but then we might have to address the knee and the hip around there too. But we can see our ankle, and I would say we're a little bit more connected with it. So it's kind of a direct relationship. We say, okay, I've hurt this area. I need to work on this area. I think sometimes we don't really put two and two together, what goes on during pregnancy. But the muscles that are mostly affected are our core muscles, I would say, and the pelvic floor. I mean, those are the ones that are going through the biggest change. The baby grows kind of inside our core muscles. And so they, like I mentioned earlier, they go through this extreme length and they go through an injury during a birth. And so those are the muscles that are most affected. And afterwards, we spend some time getting like those muscles moving again, then strengthen them and then get them back to activity. But like I said earlier, this is a planned thing that's coming. So I think that's the benefit to coming in when you're pregnant, is you can understand, okay, this is what's going on with my body. This is what it's going to feel like after. And I can start with the awareness during pregnancy. So I can feel like, what do those core muscles actually feel like when they're on versus off? And how can I make sure that they're working with all the other muscles in my body? For example, when I squat, how do I feel my pelvic floor lengthen? How do I feel my pelvic floor tighten when I come up from my squat? You know what I mean? When I'm lifting something heavy and I'm noticing I'm peeing when I'm lifting something heavy, which muscles do I actually need to get in touch with in order to stop that? Because understanding them before is helpful to be able, like, oh yeah, I remember now that they feel so weird after, I just need to do those ones that I was doing before, instead of coming in as a sleep deprived mom and kind of being like, oh my gosh, I have to learn something totally new now. Right. Whereas if you're kind of like, I got this, I practiced this before. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that's kind of how I explain it to people in terms of progressing exercise after. But the benefit to also coming in before is that having, like, during a vaginal birth, our pelvic floor muscles have to stretch upwards of 250%. So they have to lengthen 250%. And so having visuals and cues that help you do that can be really beneficial in the birth process. I think there's another misconception that the pelvic floor needs to be strong to push the baby out, but it's the uterus from above that pushes the baby out. You want a soft, relaxed pelvic floor to let the baby out, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the benefit to coming in before, is that you can really be in tune with that relaxation to use in the birth process.
Do you see a big difference in clients who are working out before they get pregnant and those who don't?
I think so. I mean, I would say being a new mom is very heavy. It's very hard. And so being in shape or feeling like you're physically able to care for or do all of the hard things that we need to do as a new mom is definitely beneficial. But I would say there's so many different ways that you can be strong. And so I always ask people, what do you like to do? Because I'm not going to suggest something you don't like doing. I think what I always say, that's why I say, what are your goals? What are you doing now? And what are your goals? Is there anything during pregnancy that you're nervous about doing? Because let's talk through that and let's help you feel comfortable with the things you like doing. But again, what are your goals after? Because I see some moms, I see everything on the spectrum from, Melissa, like, I just want to get through my day and feel like I can do everything with my kids, to people that are training to be like, go to the Olympic qualifiers. Do you know what I mean? And so like, there's a huge range, and it matters what your goals are and what you like to do, because exercise during pregnancy, they've shown so many benefits as far as not just staying, for blood pressure, for diabetes, for weight gain, for mental health, I think is the big one, but then also for after. And I think that it's definitely beneficial. And I think that starting a routine before is helpful for after. It's hard to start a new routine with a new baby. So yeah, I think that if they can find some like small 20 minutes if I got into a habit of 20 minutes 3 times a week, it's easier to kind of apply that to after instead of starting that new routine after, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've heard that postpartum, that a lot of women end up causing more damage when they end up trying to get back too quickly. Like they're like, okay, I'm ready to get my body back and I'm ready to start working out. And they just go balls to the wall with it, instead of actually giving their body the time that it needs. Do you ever kind of see that with people?
Oh, all the time. Like I said, there's a lot of societal pressure out there to get back. And I would say, especially with, I think the things that are marketed most are things like boot camp and everything. Lots of women love to run. And I always say there's nothing wrong with boot camp and running, but they're very hard. And if you go back to, for example, the ankle injury we were just talking about, you have a sprained ankle, you can barely move it for a week. And then after, if I told you, okay, listen, I want you to go out and I want you to do some jumping and I want you to do some running, and that's where I want you to start. Again, you'd think I was crazy. Like, does this lady know what she's talking about? But we do that as postpartum women. We usually feel super overwhelmed, especially the first few weeks, sometimes the first few months, just trying to kind of get by. We're not getting enough sleep. Our body's been through something big. And when I mean something big, I talked about the stretch of the muscle. I talked during the actual birth, and like we've had 9 months to stretch our whole core and everything around our abdomen, plus the birth itself, C-section or vaginal birth, creates injury to tissues. With a vaginal birth, you get a massive stretch and a pull of a lot of tissue. And the reality is our body has a certain amount of time it needs to recover. So all of those tissues feel a little bit stronger again. So it doesn't mean that you're unlucky if your tissues haven't recovered quickly. It's literally just a part of recovery. And same with the ankle. It needs some time for the tissues to be able to feel stronger again and be able to handle hard things like running or lifting heavy weights or jumping. And so with the ankle, you would expect if you came to see me for the ankle, be like, oh, hey, now that you've had time to rest it and we're confident with moving it, let's get it moving. And first, let's get all the movement back. Then let's add some strength. Then let's start to see, like, can you stand on one foot? Can you jump a little bit? Can you run with it? Can you kick a ball? The hard stuff comes after you've done the movement and the strength. And if you ask most postpartum women what they did, often it's like, I kind of waited until I saw my care provider at 6 weeks. So I really didn't do anything. And lots of women are sitting with fear, like, to do anything. And then at 6 weeks, when I got my all clear, I went for a run. I went for a 5K run. I mean, I couldn't wait to get out. But you went from basically nothing for 6 weeks to running, right? And so it would be the same as the ankle. If you did that, you'd come and you'd be like, oh, Melissa, like, my stiffness isn't going away, or it feels weak, or I keep injuring it. Yeah. You wouldn't be surprised if it happened anywhere else in your body, right?
I think that that's another misconception, though, because you think that you can't exercise until 6 weeks. And like you said, there's a lot of things you shouldn't do before then. But pelvic floor therapy can begin a couple weeks after birth.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think every therapist would differ slightly, but I'm ready to start people on things very early, because everything I would suggest in that first 6 weeks during that healing phase is awareness. It's nothing that I would want you to get symptoms from or that you would have pain from, but that you start with, I usually suggest people start with as early as day 1 or 2. I want you to breathe and I want you to feel that balloon kind of lengthen and that balloon close. Like, you're just trying to get those muscles to feel like they recognize their movement again, what it feels like to lengthen and what it feels like to close, and start to tie in the pelvic floor, what it feels like to gently lengthen my pelvic floor, gently tighten. Because the reality is, the pelvic floor goes through almost like shock postpartum. A baby comes out of there pretty fast and stretches it. And I think everyone pictures that their pelvic floor is flapping in the wind after. But again, that's not really what muscles do. You'll often find that with I'm a very much an analogies person, so I hope you're not getting sick of my analogies, but with like a whiplash injury, for example, like massive stretch of the neck muscles followed by tension, right? And so that's the same as the pelvic floor. You'll often see that's like massive length followed by the muscles kind of wanting to protect themselves. And they just don't really want to move, right? They kind of just hunker down. And so gentle movement in there can be very helpful so that you don't feel so panicky, and it allows for easier bowel movements, easier peeing. You're more likely to be able to catch yourself when you go to sneeze. But I'm a big fan of just gentle awareness initially and being able to learn to remind your pelvic floor, okay, so when I do sneeze or when I pick up my baby, I would want to contract there. When I'm sitting and nursing, I'm pretty relaxed right now, so my pelvic floor should relax here. When I poop, this is what I should feel of my pelvic floor. So I'm very much in the first 6 weeks about awareness and just getting back to gentle movement like you would with your ankle, right? And then slowly as the time progresses, you start to work on more strength, right? So let's get, for example, the glutes involved with it a little bit more and start to incorporate it into the whole body, because that's what's at the end of the day very important. And then let's start to talk about gently progressing your running. Maybe you start with a 1 minute run, 4 minute walk, so that's what I see the first 6 weeks as. You're right. Don't go hit it hard, but start to work up to that so that you're priming those muscles. The muscles are awake and ready again to do more for you, so that when you're out of that healing phase, you're more successful with progression. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. We are going to take a quick break so I can talk to you about something I was nervous about, but now I feel really confident in, and that is postpartum hair loss. So I've heard so much about your hair falling out postpartum, because you get this beautiful, amazing hair during pregnancy. But now with Nutrafol, I am not worried. There's 30 million women that are impacted by weakened or thinning hair. And if you are among them, you are not alone, sister, and there's a solution for you. Thousands of women have taken back control of their hair with Nutrafol, with many users raving that the supplement not only transformed their hair, but restored their confidence too. They offer 2 targeted formulas for women that are clinically shown to improve their hair growth and thickness with less shedding through all stages of life. Of course, you guys know that I love products that use botanicals, and Nutrafol is physician formulated to be 100% drug-free. They use medical-grade botanicals in consistently effective doses so that you get the most reliable results. And another thing is that Nutrafol's powerful ingredients bring your body back into balance. So you may also notice improvements in your overall well-being, including more restful sleep, which, I mean, let's face it, we all need, and less stress, which we all need, and better skin, nails, and libido. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after 6 months. More than 1,500 top doctors recommended Nutrafol as an effective and high-quality solution for healthier hair. You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com and using promo code MAMAS, and new customers will get 20% off. This is their best offer available anywhere, plus free shipping on every order. Get 20% off at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MAMAS. Now back to the show. All the talk of birth and what happens to your pelvic floor during birth and how the muscles kind of get stretched out and then they like come in to kind of protect themselves. I'm sitting here and my vagina kind of hurts thinking about it. I'm like, oh God, what's going to happen to my pelvic floor?
But do you know what? And that's why I always want this information. Like, we are meant to have babies and you will recover. Mm-hmm. And I think that like, it's just like anything. We don't necessarily think we're doomed when we injure anything else in our body. We're like, oh shoot, I need to start doing a little bit of rehab. And it's the same with this. And I don't want any of this information to make it sound like we're doomed. I would say that a lot of women come in and they say, oh my gosh, like all my friends are sitting around talking about how we pee or whatever. And we laugh about this is our life now. As I said, and you kind of mentioned that at the beginning. No, it doesn't need to be, right? It doesn't need to be at all. And I think that, ignoring it, definitely it won't fix the problems, but I see what you mean, because I feel like there's this flood of information lately about, you know, do this, don't do this. And it gets really overwhelming. And I hope it doesn't give this doomsday picture, because I think you're going to do great. You have so much information and you will recover. You've obviously started taking all the necessary steps. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you just said, though, kind of like friends sitting around talking about, laughing about, oh, we just pee, and that like, this is our normal now. And I think that that's something that is widely accepted too. Like, you just think, oh, I have a baby and basically I'm going to have to wear panty liners the rest of my life. Like, that's something that I feel like I've heard from people is like, oh, well, you're going to pee when you sneeze forever now. And maybe not everyone does.
No. And I would say that, like, I see lots of people that, I'm going to go back to my ankle thing again. If you had took 10 people with an ankle sprain and you did nothing with them, they just waited for time, some of them might feel that it doesn't hold them back, right? But I would bet the people that are very active and are kind of pushing and requiring more of their body would notice that they always have a bad ankle, right? And I think the same of this is, if you take something and have an injury to it and don't address it, I think maybe you could expect to have some things. Does that mean your life is over? No. I mean, I think it's up to everybody to decide whether it's a priority or not. And I don't think I can sit here and say all leaking is bad and you should make sure you address it. That's for someone else to decide. If they feel like the leaking doesn't bother them, I think they could probably attribute it to having a baby. And if they choose not to deal with it, that's their choice, right? But I do think that there's lots of options for people that are leaking. Just like if you had a sore ankle, you could go find help, right? And I think for the most part, women would be pretty darn surprised with how much their body can do when you just give it some time and some TLC. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I discovered doing my physical therapy that I had an issue before pregnancy. So I don't remember what she called it. She had a certain term for it, but I'm like an anxious peer. So before I'd go to bed, I would pee 5 times. And even if like nothing came out, I would pee like so many times. And before I'd get on a flight, I'd pee a bunch. Like anytime before I was doing an activity, I would pee a bunch of times. And throughout the day, I would pee way more than I needed to. And I don't remember, she coined a term for it, and I don't remember what it was, but...
Like urinary frequency?
Yeah, but we actually got to start working on it during my pregnancy because it meant I wasn't letting my bladder actually fill up. And you have better control when you learn to use your bladder properly. And so it was like limiting it down, like, okay, how about you pee before you start getting ready for bed and then right before you go to bed, and then that's it. And before I started my physical therapy, my husband, Vito, would say to me all the time, he'd be like, you don't have to pee. Like, you just peed. Like, just go to bed. And I'm like, no, but I just need to make sure that nothing's left in there. And it's crazy because then I started working on it while I was pregnant. And even now, so I don't get up to pee during the night. I try to drink most of my water intake during the day. And I do cat-cow before I go to bed every night. And I'm sure it'll change like once the baby drops and is squishing my bladder a little bit more, but I'm not getting up to pee. Whereas like the beginning of my pregnancy, I was all the time.
Mm-hmm. I always tell people like the pelvic floor is pretty stupid. It follows along with things going on. Like, it doesn't have a mind of its own. It's following along with things that we do in our life. And I would say a lot of people's symptoms are from habits, right? Mm-hmm. And you started, like you said, kind of like emptying your bladder quicker than you need to. But it's almost like you create a habit of it feeling like it's full, right? And so, you know, I bet you it wasn't a ton of, it's not like you needed to strengthen your pelvic floor. You needed to understand the anatomy and understand how the body works. And I think that just understanding it can sometimes make you realize, oh, wow, it's actually quite a very simple system. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be very much like on autopilot without us thinking about it. And sometimes the direction kind of goes slightly off, and it can be some very small things that we change that can make it function more quote unquote normal. Yeah, I posted a video about that on YouTube not long ago, and I called it "I Have a Small Bladder."
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the questions that I ask women is like, would someone describe you as she has a small bladder?
Yeah, I've said that before.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that it's a pretty interesting thing. It's honestly not too much about the pelvic floor strength itself, but more just of the habits and things that you do around. Yeah.
I would love to touch on prolapse. I mean, that's something that you hear a lot from pregnancy and postpartum, that women deal with prolapse. So I'd love for you to talk about what it is and if there's any tips that we can do to avoid it.
Well, prolapse, I would say, probably the scariest symptom that women have. I think it's one of those things that people Google and they see the worst of the worst. And so naturally they put themselves in the worst category. But prolapse happens from the stretch of the vaginal walls during the birth. And so when the vaginal walls stretch, the organs that live beside the vagina can start to encroach on the vagina, if that makes sense, because the walls get thinner and things around them are going to invade, because there's no, our organs don't just kind of stay in their lane. They kind of bump into one another. And when the vagina stretches out, you could have the bladder from the top. Like if you're laying down, I'm talking about the bladder from the top could start to come down. The rectum from the bottom could start to encroach on the vagina, or the cervix and uterus could make their way down from the top. I guess it would be very normal. It's normal to say that every woman right after they have a vaginal birth is going to have some degree of prolapse, because if a baby has come out of that small tube, you can bet the walls have stretched. And so you're going to have some prolapse for a while, period. I would say that grade 1 to grade 2 prolapse in the first 6 weeks postpartum is very normal, just given everything that's happened. With time, you should find that prolapse gets better and better. Okay. Women that have, I would say, the reason I'm stumbling is because sometimes people's symptoms don't match what they have. And so it's hard to give this general information. When they have prolapse that's bothersome to them, they'll feel a sense of pressure or a sense of a tampon making their way out of their vagina, or all of a sudden my diva cup won't fit in very well, my menstrual cup won't fit, or when I'm having intercourse with my partner, they're hitting something. I would say sometimes it's a heavy feeling. And very normal in the early weeks postpartum. It's not really normal to persist past about 6 or 8 weeks. You should notice that it gradually gets better. And so that would be something that I wouldn't just ignore. I wouldn't start increasing your exercise intensity if you feel that. I would have someone assess you and tell you where you're at and give you some things to work on, because the pelvic floor supports those organs from the bottom. So absolutely working on that pelvic floor, having its function again, but also looking at all of the things that cause pressure from above. And what I mean by that is that when we do things like cough or sneeze or exercise in a way that we hold our breath, like I always say, like this, mm-hmm. And when they kind of hold their breath and try to bear down to do exercise, it causes a lot of pressure. And if the walls of the vagina don't feel as supported, then that pressure is not its friend, right? And so I would say that what we do from a therapist point of view is we would work on the bottom to make sure the bottom is supportive. But what can we do to decrease the pressure that's coming down above, so that every time you do your exercise, you're not, creating more pressure, if you will. And so I guess the biggest thing I would tell people is that you're very normal to feel those sensations right after you've had a baby, but it would be a good reason to go have an assessment and figure out kind of how to move forward, because just because you have a grade 1 or grade 2 prolapse does not mean that your life's over, that you need surgery. I guarantee that I have a grade 2 prolapse. We grade it kind of from 0 to 4. I guarantee I have a grade 2 prolapse of my bladder and my rectum. I had 2 big babies come out my vagina. And if I put my finger in, or if someone else did a vaginal exam, they would feel that the ceiling is coming down and the basement wants to come up, but I don't sense that. Like on a daily basis, I don't have a clue that that's there. And so the symptoms matter way more than the grade of prolapse. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if have I answered your question?
Yeah. My vagina just hurts again thinking about it.
Oh, well, and that's why, generally I would say that, like, I had a client come in yesterday with, oh my gosh, I feel this tampon falling out all the time. She was 6 weeks postpartum, but by the time she left in a 45-minute appointment, I had explained it. I had given her some things to work on, and we talked about different ways she was sitting and standing, and the symptoms were gone. Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is, like in her case, she was kind of like thrusting her hips forward a lot when she stood. So it was almost like she was thrusting the rectum into her vagina all the time, the way she was standing. And she was sitting like that all the time to nurse, right? Plus she was only 6 weeks postpartum. And so once I kind of explained it and explained some things that she could think about to take off the pressure, you could just see the weight lifted off her shoulders. She's like, I'm fine, and I understand what I need to do. And yeah, I think it all sounds quite scary, but it's all varying degrees of normal too. And it doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are there any simple tips and tricks that you recommend to start, like, during pregnancy to help your pelvic floor during labor and delivery?
Well, this is all stuff that my pregnant clients always want to go through. Mm-hmm. So do you know what I created about a year ago? I created a resource that lives online because I was tired of writing. The reason I created it is because I was tired of writing the same homework out for a lot of them, especially when they were coming in for like just global, like I want to be proactive. And so I put together this program. It's free to anyone that wants to look at it. I called it the Push Plan Guide. It's not a guide to pushing. It's just insights and like ways to consider your pelvic floor in that process. It's a 4-part series and it comes in ebook form and video form. But the first part is about why we should pay attention to these muscles before we have a baby. The second part talks about, so should I Kegel or should I not? And I basically explain like why we shouldn't just be focusing on the strength of those muscles, but we should be focusing on the relaxation. And I give tips and I give visuals. The third one's about how I teach perineal massage and why I think it's important even for 4th-time moms. I think of it a little bit more as a body awareness thing and a way to feel almost like tension, but create softness or create length. And so it walks you through how I teach it. And then it talks about the pelvic floor in labor and birth, like the big picture and kind of what you're working up to and visuals you can think about it. Notice when I relax my ribs, my pelvic floor relaxes, stuff like that. And so it's free. It's, if you just Google Mommy Berry's Push Plan Guide, it would come up.
Yeah.
And so it's all in there. Mm-hmm. But I definitely am a fan, I guess, of the big take homes would be learn the anatomy so that you can visualize, like when my baby's coming out and I feel certain things, where those muscles are and how to lengthen them and how to feel like I can decrease resistance to the baby coming out. Like all the different positions and how they all feel different and how the pelvic floor is related to the different positions. And so being like practice the movement of the pelvic floor, feel what it feels like to tighten, feel what it feels like to relax, and do those in different positions and really focus on the relaxation towards the end of the pregnancy. And yeah, I would say kind of awareness, visualization, lots of relaxation, and a bit of a plan for postpartum as far as like, where do I want to start and what would work for me? How do I start how do I take care of myself gently? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she also has amazing other resources on her website, including a doula guide for doulas to be able to help women during labor. Because I know part of my doula training, we did learn a lot of anatomy and things like that. But this just kind of even goes deeper in how, as a doula, I can help protect that pelvic floor and help moms use it to their advantage the best way. And what other resources do you have on your website?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't really I didn't set out to make all these resources, but I was finding in my clinical practice, I was starting to see lots of kind of themes, like I said, and lots of women coming in wanting the same type of information. But a lot of it's talking and explaining. So I felt like it was a good way to put together some resources that they could consume online for a lot cheaper than coming in. So it's kind of the stuff that I feel everyone should know, is you can find online. And then when you go see your therapist in person, they can get to the very specifics with your body. So you've started the background work. And so that's kind of where it started, is I was getting so many women coming in during pregnancy saying, like, where do I start postpartum? So it started with a 6-week program that's meant to kind of live in that early healing phase. And it's about awareness. It's progressive. You work at it your own pace. But every week I spend 2 minutes on a video. I try to put it as bite-sized as possible for mom brain. And I would just give a really quick, like, listen, I want you to understand this about your pelvic floor after birth. And then let's put this into practice this week in these 3 exercises. And it's meant to take 5 to 10 minutes a day. And like, just gives you a connection and an awareness of your body. I always say, like, deal with the bodily functions and then start progressing the exercise. But it gives you guidance to me and some other therapists along the way, so that you feel like you're not sitting at home freaking out with everything going on. That's where it started. And then the free push plan guide came because I was like, oh, people need to hear about before they have the baby. Like, I need to create something that they learned about during pregnancy. The doula one came because I was seeing that, like, women would learn all of this from their therapist, but then they didn't have anyone to help them carry it out in the birth process. And I think that doulas play a huge role in that, with, you know, helping women think about different cues and visuals and let's encourage this position or what have you. And so, honestly, I keep creating things based on what I get a lot of need for. I do a webinar every couple months that talks about the things I think women should know during pregnancy. It's about 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's recorded, so you can watch it when you want. I think it gives you a really, like, umbrella visual of things like diastasis, exercise during pregnancy, the pelvic floor during pregnancy, support belts, perineal massage. I could talk about all the stuff that women are really keen to know. And so that then they're like, okay, I understand now. I'm going to go see my therapist to kind of plug in my individual needs. So yes, I mean, there are quite a few things, and I think it depends on how people like to consume information, but I try to explain things at a very basic level so that you understand. And it's all stuff that you can do quickly and at home and learn a lot about your body. And it's always meant to take away fear. Right. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Yeah. I love the perineal massage because at a lot of births that I've been to, I see the midwives be like, hey, can you feel this right here? Push into that. It's like giving you that awareness of where exactly you're directing that energy when you're pushing the baby out. Which, I mean, I never really felt or did before the perineal massage. And now I'm like, okay, I can kind of feel where that area is and kind of know how to target it and be able to, like you said, even visualize it. Then when I'm pushing the baby out, it's like, okay, I'm familiar with this area. I know where it is. I know what it feels like. And that's where I can direct my energy toward.
Exactly. And I think for me, the perineal massage is not so much about like rubbing it so much that it's floppy, because you'll never get there. Like you're not going to create a hole the size of a baby's head. But I think for me, it's really about, women practicing their visuals, practicing the length of their pelvic floor, and then actually come onto it. Like come onto those muscles to almost create a little bit of a stretch and lengthen into that. So that you feel like when you feel the sensation, because a lot of women will feel pressure or will feel pain in a specific spot. And so the goal is that you take pain and pressure and make softness, because generally our muscles want to tighten when we feel pain, right? And the muscles that live down there are your pelvic floor. So your pelvic floor is often going to want to tension when you're in pain down there, because that's what our muscles do when we're in pain. But if you know what the area looks like you said, and know what relaxation feels like, you can do that in your body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I've realized so much more being pregnant, how out of touch we are with our bodies. Mm-hmm. I think starting a couple years ago, I started using a Diva cup or a menstrual cup. And that was very eye-opening, I think, for me, getting in tune with my body and kind of starting that process. But being pregnant, I've noticed that there's just so many things that I didn't know. And then especially going into pelvic floor therapy, when we did the exam, because there was some other things I was dealing with, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that my vaginal wall had like higher muscles and these lower muscles, you know what I mean? Affected by all these different things. And, oh, that's why maybe there's too much tension right there. And just kind of completely starting to be in tune with your body. And I feel like we're not taught to explore any of that ever, right? You're not taught to like get to know your own anatomy and get to know your body and where everything's at. So there's just such a huge disconnection. And I think pelvic floor therapy is one of the bridges to helping you connect back to that.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's nothing better than my favorite, the days where I'm like that, or the clients that I'm like, that was a win, is when they come in and you can just feel the weight on their shoulders. They're like terrified of what you're going to do, and they're terrified of what you're going to find. And they don't want to talk about their most intimate details with a stranger. But then by the time the end of the session, and like I explain, why they're having their symptoms, and it's just muscle, right? And give them some things to work on, and they can feel the difference with maybe what they were doing versus what they're doing now. You can just see the weight lifted off their shoulders. Like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And now I get that. I understand why my peeing's like that, or I understand why I can't hold back my farts. It's really just something that has to do with muscle, right? And so I agree. I think that I always see that as a win when someone leaves and they're like, I get it now. And I appreciate it more. And it's just muscle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, where can people find and follow you and get access to all of your resources?
Well, I have a website, mommyberries.com. I am on Instagram, Mommy Berries Health. I have a Facebook page. It's Mommy Berries. I post stuff on YouTube, Mommy Berries Health. But generally, you'll find anywhere, message me anywhere through there, send me an email, you'll find on the website. And yeah, I'm happy to kind of help people sort out what path they feel like they need to take. And I really appreciate you, even being open to talk about this stuff, because I've sure noticed, I can't believe since I had my baby's 4 now, even since I had him, how much information is being put out there. And I think it's people like you that are willing to put yourself out there, talk about yourself a bit, but also take the time for the benefit of everyone else. Because the reality is, like, social media is really helping all of this information spread.
Right. Well, because you can go on there and see, let's say somebody sees your page and you post something, they're like, oh my gosh, that's something that I dealt with. I didn't know that that's normal, but I also didn't know that there's something I could do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. I think that social media is really good for topics like this, and for helping moms and people wanting to not feel alone in those communities.
Yeah, I would have been voted the least likely of my friends to even have an Instagram account. But I would start with doing like little talks in the community, and 3 people would come, and nobody wants to put up their hand and say, I feel something falling out of my vagina, or when I have sex, it doesn't feel right to my partner. Like, nobody wants to put up their hand in a group setting and talk about this stuff. So that's definitely where I had to come out of my comfort zone and start talking about it, because people just want to observe and they want to kind of soak it in first. And then when they feel ready, they'll go see someone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on and educate us.
Oh, well, thank you.
I love talking all things pelvic floor, although I don't really know a lot about it, but just all those questions, because it's still, even if somebody describes like what the proper way to do a Kegel, it's like, but how do you know? Am I doing it right? Am I not? And again, I'm going to go back to give yourself the gift of going to pelvic floor therapy, because my pelvic floor therapist was able to do like certain exercises with me, but also to do exams to make sure I was engaging the right places at the right time in my pelvic floor and using it properly. And was able to sense some places where there was tension that I need to work on, not while I'm pregnant, but in the future. Some areas that were too tight and the muscles were too stressed and tight. And it was just really, really, just educational and informative to like get to know your body that deeply. So highly recommend pelvic floor therapy. And again, you're going to be hearing from me and Vito very, very soon on here. And I'm really excited to share with you our exciting news. If you guys are listening and you're not subscribed, make sure that you subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Miraculous Mamas. Also check out miraculousmamas.com. My pregnancy blog's up there, talking all about my pregnancy. And the good, the bad, the ugly, the fun. In the blog, I share just even things like our birth plan, packing lists, just the different phases that I went through emotionally, physically, and all of that. So if you're interested, I didn't dive too deep into it on here on the podcast because I wanted to make sure I was bringing on guests to inform you guys on different topics or to share their stories. So you can always check out my blog if you would like to learn more. And I can't wait to bring you some exciting news soon. It might be next week. I don't know. Like I said, by now I will have had the baby or I'm in the process of having it, but I still may take a week or so just to, decompress and breathe and schedule some new guests and stuff like that. So, either in the next couple weeks, you'll be hearing from Vito and I and hearing our story. And we're so excited to share with you. Anyways, love you guys. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to September, which is actually the busiest birthing month of the year, if you guys didn't know that. So I wouldn't be surprised if I had my baby in September. So although I was doing August, September is statistically the busiest birthday month. It's all those Christmas and New Year's parties, man. But anyways, love you guys. I will talk to you next week. Bye.